In this lesson, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through some of the options on AWS for deploying Corda nodes. Let's now proceed over to the Amazon Web Services console. I'm over here at the web console for AWS. Now, to be very clear, there's a lot that goes into AWS, and the configuration requirements, such as security groups, having, for example, IAM set up, all of these little details that go into deploying, for example, a service on AWS is really beyond the scope of this demo. I'm going to walk you through how to deploy a template for Corda. That's the goal of the demo. Be aware that if you want to learn AWS, that's another whole course in itself. There's a lot that goes into this. When it comes to deploying Corda nodes, we have basically marketplace solutions that we could deploy. The other thing we could do is go over here to EC2 and deploy a node as well, and then load the Corda blockchain software effectively on the EC2 instance. And we could do the same thing with on-prem. Now, for the purpose of this demo, I want to go ahead and go over here to the marketplace. So what I'm going to do is type in Corda. And you could see that it comes up with two solutions for Corda at the time of writing. Note that there was additional options, but a lot of those have been phased out for whatever reason. There is a Corda Enterprise 4.4 solution sold by R3 that is available, and you would bring your own license to be able to deploy the enterprise virtual machine. There's also the blockchain gateway where you could load, basically, this is a third party you could use as well. So if I go here to the Corda Enterprise virtual machine, there's basically a few things that come into play. What this is going to do first is it's going to provide you a template to deploy the virtual machine on top of. Now, with AWS, the marketplace is really about deploying these templates. So there's, again, a lot of different options we could deploy when it comes to like blockchains. If we search, we could deploy Hyperledger templates. We could deploy Ethereum templates, just as an example, just to show you. So if I go over here, I could search the marketplace. And this will bring up any number of Hyperledger-based solutions. There's quite a bit, for example, for Hyperledger in Ethereum. But for Corda, we're pretty limited, and this is true on Azure as well. So you can see here, here's the two options. So I'm going to go over here. I want to select the Enterprise VM. Now, you want to look at the pricing. It's going to be based on the virtual machine you deploy. And that's going to be the estimated cost for the EC2 instance per hour. And you want to select, for example, the proper solution. You also need to select the region that you're going to deploy this in. Now, the region in AWS is effectively where the data center is located. You're going to deploy the VM in the cloud. Now, over here, this is a BYOB agreement. So you would already need to have the enterprise licensing from Corda to be able to use this effectively. Now, if you go down here, it also tells you the template components. So we're going to deploy two services called EC2 and EBS. For those not familiar with EC2, this is Elastic Compute Cloud. That's your infrastructure as a service VMs. EBS is Elastic Block Store. This is basically block storage that's going to attach to the EC2 instance. And then when we go up here, you could see that if I scroll down one more thing, I could select, again, the fulfillment option. Now, some of the marketplace solutions, in this case, is via an AMI. Some you could deploy via a website, a template, etc. So it really depends. So over here, go to continue to subscribe. This is the R3 offer. You have to accept the terms to proceed. This will tell you the VM that you're going to use. Now, sometimes, and again, this is a work in progress, you have to accept the terms and it'll deploy basically the subscription. So it doesn't deploy actually the VM yet. There's more to this, but it has to add the virtual machine to your subscription. So I'm going to let this complete. This could take 2 to 3, 4 minutes sometimes. It depends. If you go over here to show details, this will again BYOL. So again, there is basically, again, a cost to use the VMs, but for the software, there is no cost. So that's why it says 0. Some solutions in the marketplace will charge you per hour for using the enterprise software. Corda does not do that because in this case, you're bringing your own license. So you already need an enterprise license for this solution. I'll come back when this is ready. Okay, so it did complete. The effective date is today. Go over here to continue to config. Now, this is where it is going to, again, make sure I select what I want. It's pretty limited here on what you can deploy. There's really only one option other than changing the region that you deploy in. So continue to launch. This is the usage instructions. This will tell you basically how to become root on the virtual machine and then how to copy drivers and anything else that is needed. I want to go ahead and launch through either the website, EC2, or the service catalog. So I go launch through EC2. That'll bring me over to the EC2 dashboard, and it's bringing me to the instance type. I could go over here and select different things, for example, on how to deploy. Now, again, as I had stated initially, there was a lot of choices when I deploy a VM. It's beyond the scope of this demo. I'm just going to go ahead and deploy this. This is EBS. I could add another volume if I wanted to. Add tags. Now, security groups, one of the things that is needed is we need to be able to add the right security groups so that the virtual machine can communicate with the outside world and the outside world can communicate with the virtual machine. So again, I go ahead and say custom. I could say anywhere, my IP, for example. So what I want to do here is select my IP. This way I can access the VM only from my IP. Now, from a security perspective, you don't want to have anywhere because you're basically allowing anyone to basically scan for your virtual machine. It's not really a bright idea. Typically, if you're an enterprise, you want to create a custom source list. And then, again, whatever works. Once again, that's another discussion around security groups and what we have to do. And then anywhere here. So, for example, I typically want to do custom. In this case, I'm just going to say anywhere. And because, again, the main reason I'm going to just deploy this and then delete it after. Going to review and launch. It's saying that it is not eligible for the free tier. So some of the services in AWS are free tier, some are not. So I'll be paying to use this VM. It's also letting me know that this is open to the world and you may not really want to do that. Now, again, to fix that, if I wanted to, I could simply go over here. Instead of saying anywhere, I just go my IP. And that'll solve that problem. So go over here to launch, and now that challenge has been sort of removed. And with that said, now in reality, I just want you to think about this. If I'm going to deploy blockchain nodes in a cloud provider, I'm going to deploy typically a cluster of nodes in most cases. In this case, I'm going to deploy just one node to show you how easy it is to get started with AWS and how to deploy a blockchain template. I'm going to go launch. And basically, when I do that, let me go ahead and bring this up a little bit so that you could see. Okay, right there, you should be able to see that. And when I hit launch, it's going to deploy that EC2 instance after I select a key pair. So what I could do is choose an existing key pair if I had some. I deleted them because there's a cost to that, keeping them. Or I could create a new key pair. So what I want to do here is create a new key pair. And what I'm going to do is call this the Corda blockchain network. And I'll just call it key pair. And it'll go ahead and add the PEM extension basically that I need. I go download key pair and see there's the PEM. And then what it'll do is, in this case, it'll download it to your downloads and then you get it there. And then what you want to do is launch the instance. Once you do that, you launch it. Now, before I launch it, one quick note. The reason you need a key pair is if you want to connect via SSH to the virtual machine, you want to be able to manage the virtual machine. So you typically want the key pair on your management network or your management node that you're using to access the VMs in Amazon Web Services. And you typically want to use PuTTY, for example, as a way to connect. That's another lesson in itself. I don't have time to walk you through that, and I want to keep it on par with getting this deployed. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that instance. So this is going to go ahead and deploy. This could take up to a minute. Once it's done, I'll come back. Okay, so the instance is now launching. And I go over here to select this instance. This is going to bring me over to the EC2 dashboard. As you see, the instance is running. What I probably want to do here is name that so that I know what it is. Blockchain node 1, let's say, and then save it so that when I deploy other EC2 instances, I know what is what. That's the instance ID. This tells me the status, gives me the public IP address as well. So this node now has been deployed. If I want to connect to it, this is the instance ID. I could connect via different methods like SSH and then EC2 connect. Now, when I connect, for example, you need to make sure that you have the right security group set up again. And you can see there is saying you can't connect. And the reason is because you need to set up the access to be able to do that. So when you deploy on AWS, it's not just deploying the blockchain node. There's a lot of work that goes into getting the instance ready to be running anything on AWS. But it is that simple to deploy a template. Now, when we go back here to the AWS, let's see where it is, Marketplace. And actually, let's do this. Let's make it simple. Go to Corda. That'll bring it up quicker. And this is, again, this is my subscription. It already says I have a subscription. I view the subscription. And one of the things you'll need to do when you get everything set up is you'll want to go over here to Manage, or you go select here. And now this is the licensing entitlement. So for me to deploy the enterprise version, I need to set up the SLR with Corda. So you need, first of all, License Manager installed. And again, there's about 40 to 50 steps that you have to go through just in AWS to even have this even connected and be able to do anything. So there's a lot there. With that said, I just wanted to give you a brief idea of what you can do with Corda in AWS. So you can deploy a template. You can license if you have the enterprise Corda. Now, what about another question? What about if you want to deploy Corda open source? Well, here's what you want to do. Since there isn't really a good template available for the open source version, what we could do here is go deploy another instance, and we could use the free tier, but what we'd want to do is go over to, let's say here, Corda GitHub, and go directly to the open source GitHub here. What we want to do now is go over here to find the current version, which it states under releases. Latest version, if we click that, this will bring us over to 4.1. And this is the zip file for the source code that we could download. Now, one of the things we'll need, of course, is we're going to need to typically, if we're going to be developing Corda D apps, we're going to need to have basically a form of an IDE. So basically it could be the IDEA IDE if you want. We're also need to have several other things. For example, we'll need to have a Git installed to be able to, and a package manager to be able to, of course, download and get everything all ready to go. And then there'll be, of course, some other things that you'll want to have ready as well as a developer. Now, when it comes to developing with Corda, you always need to go over to the release notes, as with any other service that you're using on GitHub, any code you're downloading, whatever. So with that said, this is the GitHub for Corda. Go over here, get the latest release notes. And that's really how to get started. Now, when it comes to getting your IDE set up, getting, for example, the test net set up, that requires another course in itself, a lot of that. But with that said, this should get you started. You should be able to deploy an EC2 instance. You'll need to figure out a lot of the AWS credentials. That is, again, another course in itself. But with that said, there's a lot of good materials available, and I encourage you to refer to the Corda documents that will provide additional insight. With that said, let us proceed to the next lesson.